Imagine disappearing into the wilderness with nothing but a few tools, raw timber, and your own hands, no hardware store, no help, no second chances. That's how mountain men built their cabins from scratch. They felled trees, shaped logs by hand, sealed gaps with mud and moss, and created shelters sturdy enough to survive brutal winters and total isolation. Every cabin was a lesson in survival, patience, and grit. If you enjoy these short, cozy dives into forgotten skills and history, don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps. All right, tonight we're taking a look at how mountain men built cabins from scratch.
It's a frigid October morning in 1834, somewhere in what will someday be Montana. Right now, it's just wilderness, a vast expanse of mountains and forest where the only law is survival. The ground beneath you is hard-packed dirt frozen from the overnight chill. Your entire body aches from sleeping on it. Instead of your cozy mattress, you're lying on a bed of pine boughs that barely cushions you from the cold earth. Your wool blanket is stiff with frost, and your breath forms clouds in the pre-dawn air. The fire you built last night is nothing but embers now. Your hands sting with fresh blisters as you push yourself up. The storm that's been brewing for days is closing in. Dark clouds loom over the distant peaks, and the wind carries the sharp scent of snow. You've been in these mountains long enough to read the signs. This isn't just any storm, it's the kind that kills unprepared men. You have two choices: build shelter today, or freeze to death within a week. Or most folks don't realise, I learned this from an old journal I found in a historical society archive, that a mountain man had maybe 12 hours to get a basic cabin up once he decided winter was coming. 12 hours between life and death. The journal belonged to a trapper named Jeremiah Winters, who worked these mountains in the 1830s. He described how he once built a cabin with nothing but an axe sharp enough to cut bone, hands tough as leather, and the knowledge that failure meant death. His account is fascinating because it shows just how much skill these men had. This wasn't just throwing some logs together. You stretch your back, feeling yesterday's labour in every muscle. You've spent 3 days scouting for the perfect location, and yesterday you finally found it. A small clearing on a gentle south-facing slope near a spring that won't freeze even in the deepest winter. There's a natural windbreak of dense pines to the north, and from this elevation you can see anyone approaching from miles away. These weren't random choices. Every decision matters when your life depends on it. Let me paint you a picture of what you're facing. Towering pines surrounding you, their trunks 3 feet thick, reaching 100 feet into the sky. The forest floor is a tangle of fallen logs, rocks, and undergrowth. To your untrained eye, it's just wilderness, but to a mountain man, it's all material. Everything you need to survive is right here if you know how to use it. You grab your possibles bag, a leather pouch containing your essential survival items, flint and steel, knife, whetstone, all a few strips of jerky, and a small pouch of salt. Your rifle leans against a tree nearby, and your axe, a handcrafted tool with a head forged in St. Louis, is buried in a stump where you left it yesterday. I've actually held one of these period axes at a museum in Wyoming. The curator told me these weren't just tools, they were literally worth a man's life out here. A mountain man would sleep with his axe rather than risk it being stolen. The first light of dawn barely penetrates the forest canopy, As you stir the embers of last night's fire and add some tinder, shredded cedar bark you've kept dry in your bag, you blow gently, coaxing the sparks to life. The tiny flame catches, and soon you've got enough fire to warm your hands and cook a meagre breakfast of jerky and the last of your cornmeal mixed with water. You know what's crazy for these guys? This wasn't camping. This was Tuesday. They lived like this for years at a time, completely alone in the wilderness. Can you imagine going months without seeing another human being? I mean, I get anxious when my Wi-Fi goes out for an hour. With breakfast done, you grab your axe and head to the edge of your clearing. Today's the day. You've already marked several straight lodgepole pines, perfect for cabin logs. Their straight grain and resistance to rot makes them ideal building material. First rule of cabin building, an old mountain man once told a journalist in 1872, pick your trees like you'd pick a wife, straight, strong, and able to weather the storms. You approach the first tree about 14 inches in diameter and nearly 100 feet tall. Taking a deep breath, you swing your axe, feeling the satisfying bite as the sharp edge sinks into the bark. Chips of wood fly as you make a notch on the side facing the direction you want the tree to fall. Your arms already burn from the effort, but you keep going. There's no rest when winter's coming. Each swing of the axe is deliberate, calculated. You're not just chopping, you're having a conversation with the tree, reading its lean, its balance, understanding how it will fall. Wait, hold up. Picture this. You're alone in this massive wilderness. If this tree falls wrong, if it snaps back or doesn't fall where you intend, there's no one to pull it off you. No ambulance to call, no hospital within 1,000 miles. One mistake and you're just another nameless casualty of the frontier. I spoke with a wilderness survival expert who specializes in historical techniques, and he told me something fascinating. These men developed a sixth sense about trees. They could read the subtle signs of how a tree would fall, the way the branches distributed weight, how the grain twisted, even how the wind affected it. It wasn't just strength. It was an intimate knowledge of the materials they worked with. The notch deepens nearly a third of the way through the trunk. Now you move to the opposite side, making a slightly higher cut. This technique, learned from native tribes and perfected by generations of woodsmen, ensures the tree falls exactly where you want it. With a series of final powerful swings, you hear it, that unmistakable crack that signals the tree is beginning to give way. You step back quickly, eyes fixed on the top of the pine as it sways, hesitates, and then surrenders to gravity. The crash echoes through the forest as 100 feet of pine thunders to the ground, sending birds scattering from nearby trees. The impact shakes the earth beneath your feet, and the scent of fresh cut pine fills the air. One down. You'll need at least 20 more before the day is done. Your body is screaming for rest, but the clouds on the horizon are darkening. You can practically smell the snow in the air maybe 12 hours before the storm hits if you're lucky. Oh, and here's a detail most history books leave out. Mountain men didn't just need shelter for themselves. Your horse is tethered nearby, grazing nervously as the wind picks up. Lose your horse to the cold and you might as well dig your own grave. No horse meant no mobility, no way to transport traps or furs, and in many cases no way to outrun hostile natives or predators. A wise trapper, one 1840s account stated, builds his horse shelter before his own. A dead trapper still has his horse. A live trapper without a horse soon becomes dead. Now you need to limb the fallen tree, cutting away all the branches to leave a clean trunk. Your axe bites into the smaller limbs, while larger branches require careful cutting to avoid binding the axe. Each stroke must be precise. Wasted energy means death when you're burning thousands of calories a day just to survive. The sun climbs higher, but the warmth is fleeting. The wind is picking up, carrying the first few snowflakes. You work faster, stripping the tree down to a bare log, then moving to the next marked pine. By midday, your hands are raw. Blood seeps through the fresh blisters, making the axe handle slick and even more painful to grip. But you don't stop. Can't stop. 3 trees are down now, their massive trunks lying parallel in the clearing. In my research, I found an account from a mountain man named James Kleiman, who wrote, "My hands bled so bad from the axe that my log notches filled with blood. By nightfall I couldn't feel my fingers, but I kept swinging. The alternative was a shallow grave come spring thaw. Your stomach growls, reminding you that you haven't eaten since dawn. You pause only long enough to chew on a strip of jerky and drink from the nearby spring. The water is so cold it makes your teeth ache, but it refreshes you enough to continue. The next tree is thicker, nearly 2 feet in diameter. You circle it, looking for the best approach, then begin chopping. Your muscles have found their rhythm now, and despite the pain, each swing falls with practiced precision. But halfway through, disaster strikes. The axe head, loosened from thousands of impacts, suddenly flies off the handle, landing several feet away in the underbrush. Well, shit, you mutter, staring at the useless wooden handle in your hand. This is one of those moments where modern folks have no concept of what real trouble is. Today you'd drive to Home Depot. Out here, this could literally mean death. Your heart races as you search the undergrowth. Losing your axe now would be catastrophic. You drop to your knees, frantically pushing aside leaves and twigs until there, the metal head gleams dully in the filtered sunlight. Relief floods through you, but it's short-lived. Now you need to reattach it, and quickly. From your possibles bag, you pull out a small roll of rawhide that you've been saving. You soak it in water from your canteen to make it pliable, then set to work. First, you carefully reshape the top of the handle where it fits into the axe head. Then you wedge it back together, wrapping the wet rawhide tightly around the join. As the rawhide dries, it will shrink, creating a bond nearly as strong as the iron. While you wait for it to set, you use your knife to continue limbing the fallen trees. It's slower, more tedious work, but you can't afford to waste a moment. I interviewed a historical reenactor who specializes in mountain man skills, and he told me, these men weren't just survivors, they were problem solvers of the highest order. They had to be engineers, architects, doctors, hunters, weathermen and warriors all rolled into one, and they had to do it all with maybe 10 tools total. After an hour, the rawhide has dried enough that you can cautiously resume your work. The axe head is secure for now, but you'll need to check it frequently. Each swing is tentative at first, but soon you're back to your previous pace. The day wears on, 4 trees down, 5, 6. Your shadow stretches long across the clearing as the sun begins its descent behind the mountains. The temperature is dropping rapidly and the snowflakes are getting larger, more frequent. Your body is at its limit. Every muscle screams for rest. Blood has soaked through your buckskin gloves, and your vision blurs with exhaustion. But the primitive shelter of pine boughs that protected you last night won't keep you alive through what's coming. You look up at the darkening sky. Just give me till morning, you whisper, though you're not sure who you're talking to. maybe God, maybe just the mountains themselves. With 7 tall pines felled and limbed, you've got enough to start the actual cabin construction. Tomorrow you'll cut more, but today's work has earned you a fighting chance. As darkness falls, you build up your fire and force yourself to eat more jerky, even though exhaustion has killed your appetite. You know you'll need every calorie for tomorrow's labour. The wind bones through the trees, and snow begins to fall in earnest. You wrap yourself in your blanket beside the fire, your axe within arm's reach. Sleep comes instantly, your body surrendering to exhaustion. But even in sleep, your mind is working, planning tomorrow's labour, calculating what you'll need, how you'll notch the logs, raise the walls, build the roof. Because out here, even your dreams must be practical if you want to survive. Unlike your cosy bed right now with its soft mattress and warm covers, your sleep is light, alert, ready to wake at any sound that doesn't belong. The mountain lions scream, the wolves howl, or worse, the soft footfall of an approaching grizzly drawn by the scent of man. This is where we'll pause for tonight. Tomorrow we'll see if our mountain man can raise those walls before the full force of the storm hits. But for now, let the gentle weight of your blankets remind you how far we've come from those desperate days when shelter meant the difference between life and death. Just imagine as you drift towards sleep what it would feel like to know that your survival depends entirely on what you can build with your own 2 hands before the storm arrives. Something's wrong. Your eyes snap open to complete darkness. For a moment you can't remember where you are. Then it all comes rushing back. The clearing, the felled trees, the approaching storm. The fire has died. That's what woke you. The bitter cold has crept in, seeping through your wool blanket, settling into your bones. You sit up, every muscle screaming in protest. Your hands are so stiff you can barely move them. The blisters, now frozen scabs that crack and bleed as you flex your fingers. Snow blankets the ground around you. Not the gentle dusting from yesterday evening, but a solid 3 inches. It fell silently while you slept, a white shroud covering everything. Your breath hangs in the air, a cloud of crystallized vapor that disperses slowly in the still morning. You check the eastern sky. No hint of dawn yet, but you can't afford to wait for the sun. Every hour of daylight is precious now. I read an account from a trapper named William Anderson, who described waking up in similar conditions. My beard had frozen to my blanket. When I tore free, it pulled out a patch of whiskers. My spit turned to ice before it hit the ground. But I knew that if I didn't move, I'd be stiff as a board by sunup. With aching fingers, you rake through the ashes of last night's fire, praying for a live coal. There, a faint orange glow buried deep in the white ash. You gently place your handful of tinder, cedar bark you've kept dry inside your shirt over the ember, and blow softly, rhythmically, coaxing it to life. The spark catches a tendril of smoke rising from the tinder. You add pencil-thin twigs, then slightly larger ones, building the fire methodically. Fire isn't just comfort out here, it's life itself. As the flames grow, you stand and stamp your feet, trying to force blood back into your numb toes. Every joint in your body feels like it's filled with ground glass. But you're alive, and as long as you're alive you can build. While the fire strengthens, you check your supplies. The jerky is nearly gone, maybe 2 days' worth if you ration it carefully. Your powder is dry, thank God, safely wrapped in oiled cloth. The axe head is still firmly attached to its handle. Small victories. You actually slept in your boots to keep them from freezing solid. Smart move, because wet leather freezes harder than stone, and you can't work with feet like blocks of ice. You wolf down a strip of jerky and drink from your canteen. The water inside is half-frozen slush. The forest is preternaturally quiet, muffled by the snow. You can almost hear your own heart beating. This is the silence that makes men start talking to themselves after too many months alone. "Okay," you mutter, your voice sounding strange after days of silence. "Got to get moving." You know, mountain men had a saying, "Dawn to dusk, swing the axe, or come spring, a bear's on your grave." Not exactly poetry, but it got the point across. The snow has complicated things. You'll need to clear it from the fallen logs before you can work them, and more trees to fell means tramping through snow to find the right ones. But first things first, you need to start processing the logs you already have. Yesterday was about quantity, getting enough trees down to work with. Today is about precision, turning those logs into the components of a cabin that will keep you alive. With your knife, you scrape a patch of snow clear and use a charred stick to sketch a rough plan in the dirt. The cabin will be small, roughly 10 feet by 12 feet, just enough space for a sleeping platform, a fireplace, and a room to move around. Anything larger would be impossible to heat efficiently. As the first grey light of dawn filters through the pines, you gather your tools and approach the first log. Ideally, you'd let these logs season for months, but winter won't wait. You'll have to work with green wood and deal with the shrinkage later. First step, remove the bark. Bark holds moisture and attracts insects. It has to go. You take your axe and begin stripping the log, working from one end to the other. The bark comes away in satisfying chunks, revealing the pale, fresh wood beneath. I once tried this at a living history museum in Colorado. The historian there said, "Most folks don't realize that debarking a single log can take hours. These mountain men would spend days just prepping logs before they could even start building. The work is tedious but rhythmic, as you settle into the familiar swing, scrape move pattern. Your muscles warm up and the pain recedes to a dull background throb. The sun finally crests the eastern mountains, sending long golden rays through the trees. The snow glitters like scattered diamonds, and for a moment the beauty of it takes your breath away. Then a gust of wind cuts through your buckskins, reminding you that beauty out here is just death wearing a pretty mask. By mid-morning, you've debarked 3 logs. Your stomach is growling, but you ignore it. No time for a proper meal now. You chew another strip of jerky as you work, the tough meat softening slowly in your mouth. Now comes the challenging part. Notching. The corners of your cabin will be held together by precisely cut notches that lock the logs together. Get this wrong, and your walls will be unstable, full of gaps that let in wind and snow. You've seen enough cabins to know the basic technique, the saddle notch. It's the simplest and most effective for a one-man job. You'll cut a rounded groove near the end of each log size to cradle the log that will rest on it. Measuring is crucial. You pace off the dimensions again, marking the corners with stakes. Then you drag the first debarked log to position it as the base of the north wall. Marking the notch points takes careful calculation. You hold your axe handle horizontally across the log, using it as a straight edge to mark where the cuts need to be. 2 notches, one at each end, to receive the east and west wall logs. With your axe you make a series of parallel cuts at the marked point, about 4 inches apart and 6 inches deep. Then you chop out the wood between the cuts, forming a rough trough. This first notch isn't pretty, but it doesn't need to be. It just needs to hold the next log securely. The sun climbs higher, melting some of the snow. Your back is slick with sweat despite the cold, and you pause occasionally to drink from the spring. The work is slow, exacting. Each notch requires at least 20 minutes of careful chopping. Hold up a sec. Let me paint you a picture of what's happening here. You're standing in a small clearing, surrounded by towering pines. The mountains rise like blue giants in the distance. The fresh snow covers everything except the circle round your fire and the areas where you've been working. Your breath clouds in front of you. Your hands are raw, leaving smears of blood on the pale wood. Every few minutes you stop to wipe sweat from your eyes, with the sleeve already stiff with frozen perspiration. A hawk circles overhead, riding the thermal currents, probably wondering what this strange two-legged creature is doing. The only sounds are your axe biting into wood, your laboured breathing, and occasionally the distant howl of a wolf. This is what solitude really means. Not an hour without your phone. I'm talking complete isolation from humanity. It's just you, the mountains, and the knowledge that if you fail, no one will ever find your body. By noon, you've positioned and notched the 4 base logs. The foundation of your cabin, it's starting to take shape. A simple rectangle marked out on the snowy ground, but you're only just beginning. You need more trees. These 7 you felled yesterday aren't nearly enough. Looking at your progress, you estimate you'll need at least 15 more for the walls, plus more for the roof. You trudge through the snow, axe over your shoulder, searching for the right trees. Not just any tree will do. You need straight ones with minimal taper, ideally about a foot in diameter, pines preferably for their straight grain and natural resistance to rot. I spoke with a forestry expert who studied the cabins built by mountain men, and he told me these guys were incredibly selective. They could look at a stand of 100 trees and immediately identify the 5 worth cutting. They weren't just lumberjacks, they were craftsmen who understood their materials intimately. You spot a perfect candidate, a lodgepole pine about 14 inches at the base, arrow straight with few branches on the lower trunk. You check the surrounding area to make sure it has a clear full path, then begin chopping. Your technique has improved since yesterday. You create the notch on the full side more quickly, angling your cuts to create a precise wedge. Then you move to the back side, making a slightly higher horizontal cut. The tree begins to creak. You step back, watching the top for any sign of movement. There's a moment of complete stillness, then a sharp crack. The pine begins its descent, picking up speed, the branches rushing through the air with a sound like tearing fabric. It falls exactly where you intended, crashing through the smaller trees in its path, finally coming to rest with a ground-shaking thud that sends a puff of snow into the air. 1 down, many more to go. The day settles into a rhythm. Fell, limb, debark, repeat. Your body moves on autopilot while your mind drifts. You think about the warm trading post down on the Missouri, with their roaring fires and barrels of whiskey. You think about St. Louis with its bustle and noise and women in calico dresses. Seems like a dream now. I found this letter from a mountain man to his sister back east. Sometimes I wonder if the towns still exist or if they've all vanished like morning mist. The wilderness has a way of making civilization seem like a story someone told you once. By mid-afternoon, you've added 3 more trees to your stockpile. Your hands have gone beyond pain to a sort of numb detachment. blood has soaked through your gloves, making the axe handle sticky. You've stopped noticing the cold except when the wind gusts. The sky is darkening again, not just with the approach of evening, but with more weather. The storm is building, layers of heavy clouds rolling in from the northwest. You might have one more day before it hits full force. You turn your attention back to the cabin site. With the base logs in place, you need to start building upward. This is where it gets tricky. Raising the logs alone is back-breaking work. For the next level, you cut a sloping ramp of smaller logs, creating a rough incline up to the top of the base logs. Then you laboriously roll the next log up this ramp using your shoulder as the main power source. The first one nearly defeats you. Halfway up the ramp, the log shifts unexpectedly, almost rolling back over you. You leap aside just in time, watching as it crashes back to the ground, destroying part of your ramp. Son of a you-snarl, kicking at the snow in frustration. I read an account from a trapper who described this exact problem. Raising logs alone is a dance with death. One slip and 2,000 B of pine will snap your spine like a twig. I saw a man near Fort Hall crushed flat when his log rolled. We buried what was left of him in a shallow grave and divided his possessions. That's frontier justice. You rebuild the ramp, making it less steep, and try again. This time, you use a rope looped around the log to help control it as you roll it upward. Your progress is agonizingly slow, but the log finally reaches the top of the ramp and settles into the notches cut in the base logs. Success. One wall is now 2 logs high. The rest of the afternoon passes in a blur of sweat and strain. You manage to raise one more log on each wall before darkness begins to fall. The temperature drops with the sun, and the wind picks up, driving icy needles of snow against your face. Your fingers are numb claws, your lips cracked and bleeding from the cold and dehydration. When you finally stop, your legs nearly buckle beneath you. The cabin is taking shape, a rectangle of logs too high. The beginnings of what will be your sanctuary against the coming winter. But it's nowhere near complete. At your current pace, you estimate 3 more days of work before it's even marginally habitable. The question is whether the storm will give you that long. You gather firewood, armloads of branches from the trees you felled, and build up your fire to a roaring blaze. Tonight will be colder than last night, and you need all the warmth you can get. Sitting by the fire, you pull off your gloves to examine your hands. They're a mess. Blisters upon blisters. Some broken and seeping, others swollen with fluid. Your palms are crisscrossed with cuts from bark and splinters. You pour a little precious water over them to clean away the blood and dirt. Then hold them close to the flames, welcoming the stinging pain that means feeling is returning. Your muscles are trembling with exhaustion and hunger gnaws at your belly. You force yourself to eat sparingly, just enough jerky to keep your strength up. When that runs out, you'll need to hunt, but that's a problem for another day. As darkness settles fully over the forest, you wrap yourself in your blanket and lie down beside the fire. The day's work has left you too exhausted to worry about comfort. Sleep takes you almost instantly, dragging you down into blackness. But even in sleep, your mind is working, solving problems, planning the next day's labour, how to raise the walls higher, how to create the gable ends, how to fashion a roof that won't collapse under the weight of snow. Because out here, even your dreams have to be practical. The mountains don't care about your hopes or fears, they only respect preparation and grit. and as you sink deeper into sleep, the snow begins to fall again, silent and steady, covering your fallen logs, your tools, the entire clearing in a fresh blanket of white. Unlike your warm bed now with its soft pillows and controlled temperature, your sleep is restless, half alert. One ear always listening for the approach of danger, one hand never far from your rifle, but for now you've survived another day. In the wilderness, that's victory enough. The wall of logs is beginning to rise, a testament to human determination against the indifferent force of nature. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, the most difficult part of the build. But for now, rest. Gather your strength. The cabin that stands between you and death is taking shape. Log by grueling log, a sound wakes you. Not the wind, not an animal, something else. You lie perfectly still, eyes closed, listening. There it is again, the distinct crunch of snow under a moccasin. Someone's approaching your camp. Your hand slides to your rifle, fingers wrapping around the cold metal of the barrel. Out here, visitors are rarely friendly. It could be Blackfoot warriors who've killed more than a few trappers in these mountains. Could be claimed jumpers looking to steal what little you have. Could even be a rogue grizzly, though they should be denning up by now. The footsteps pause, then a voice calls out, rough but distinctly human. Hello? The camp coming in, friendly. You sit up slowly, rifle ready, but not aimed. Show yourself. Two figures emerge from the tree line, their breath clouding in the cold morning air. Men in buckskins, each with a rifle and an axe. Trappers by the look of them. One's tall and lanky with a greying beard that reaches his chest. The other's shorter, stockier, with a face so weathered it looks carved from the mountains themselves. Name's Fitzgerald, says the tall one. This here's Cooper. Spotted your smoke yesterday evening. Thought we'd check if he was alive or dead. I've read dozens of trapper journals, and this was more common than you'd think. In the vast wilderness, trappers would sometimes seek each other out, especially before winter. Safety in numbers, sharing of skills, and honestly probably just to hear another human voice after months of isolation. You lower your rifle slightly but keep it close. Trust comes hard in the mountains. What brings you boys this far up? Cooper spits a stream of tobacco juice into the snow. Beaver Creek down yonder's lousy with him. But that storm coming ain't no joke. Saw you was building. Figured maybe we could lend a hand, make it go faster. You study them carefully. Their gear is worn but well maintained. No signs of desperation that might make them dangerous. And truth be told, you could use the help. Coffee's ready if you want some, you say, nodding toward your small fire. It's as close to a welcome as you're going to give. You know what's funny? I found this letter in a historical archive where a mountain man wrote to his brother. Met two fellows building a cabin near the Yellowstone. We helped raise their walls in exchange for coffee and conversation. Neither of us mentioned how we nearly shot each other at first light. Some things don't need saying out here. Fitzgerald and Cooper hunker down by your fire, accepting the tin cups of black coffee you offer. The liquid is bitter and strong, boiled multiple times from the same grounds, but hot out here. That's luxury enough. As dawn breaks fully, you study your new companions. Both men have the hard, lean look of those who've survived multiple winters in the high country. Their buckskins are patched and stained, their faces wind-burned and etched with lines, but their eyes are clear and alert. The eyes of men who've learned to see danger before it sees them. That's a good start you got there, Fitzgerald says, nodding toward your half-built cabin, but them walls need to be higher before that storm hits proper. Cooper grunts in agreement. Reckon we can get it done today if we all pitch in. You're not a man who trusts easily, but survival trumps suspicion. And 3 men can accomplish in a day what would take you 3 on your own. Got tools for all of us, you ask? Cooper pats the axe hanging from his belt. Never go anywhere without old Betsy here. Fitzgerald stretches his lanky frame and stands. Let's get to it then. Daylight's burning. I interviewed an expert on frontier cooperation at the Wyoming Historical Society, and she told me these temporary partnerships were crucial for survival. Men who might normally compete for trapping territory would come together to build cabins, hunt, or fight off threats. Then they'd go their separate ways, sometimes without even learning each other's real names. With the addition of Fitzgerald and Cooper, the work takes on a new rhythm. Fitzgerald, it turns out, has built more than a few cabins in his day. He shows you a better technique for notching, what he calls the saddle notch. See, you don't want to cut straight across, he explains, demonstrating with his axe. You want to round it like this, so the log above sits snug, keeps the wind out better. His technique creates a curved depression at the end of each log, perfectly shaped to cradle the crossing log. It's simple but effective, the kind of knowledge that can only come from experience. Cooper, meanwhile, is a master at raising logs with his stocky, powerful build. He devises a lever system using smaller logs as fulcrums to lift the heavy pine trunks into place. Learned this from the Frenches down on the Mississippi, he says, grunting as he throws his weight onto the lever, raising a log that would have taken you hours to position. Work smarter, not harder. The morning passes in a blur of coordinated effort. Logs that would have taken you a full day to raise are now going up every hour. The walls climb steadily, 3 logs high, then 4. You planning a fireplace? Fitzgerald asks during a brief water break. East wall, you reply, pointing. Figured I'd use those rocks from the creek bed. He nods approvingly. Smart. We should leave the opening now, save you having to cut it later. You'd been so focused on just getting walls up that you hadn't thought that far ahead. But he's right. It's much easier to build around the fireplace opening than to cut through completed walls. You want to hear something wild? During an archaeological dig at an 1830s trapper cabin in Wyoming, they found that the fireplace foundation included buffalo bones and elk antlers mixed with the stones. The trapper had used whatever materials were available. Talk about frontier ingenuity. By midday you've established a smooth workflow. Cooper fells and limbs. You debark and rough notch, and Fitzgerald does the final notching and directing the placement. The cabin walls now stand 5 logs high, taller than a man. The sky has darkened further, and the wind carries the unmistakable smell of snow. Fat flakes begin to fall slowly at first, then more steadily. She's coming on faster than I figured, Cooper says, glancing at the sky with a frown. Fitzgerald nods grimly. We've got maybe 5 hours of daylight left. Need to get them walls up to full height and start on the roof, or all this works for nothing. The mention of a roof presents a new challenge. You've been so focused on the walls that you haven't fully planned the roof structure. Building a proper pitched roof requires rafters, beams, and more complex notching than the walls. Ever built a roof before? Fitzgerald asks, seemingly reading your thoughts. You shake your head. First cabin. He spits into the snow. Well, you picked a hell of a time to learn, but we'll get you squared away. As the afternoon wears on, the snowfall intensifies. You work through it, ignoring the wet and cold. Your hands already raw from days of labour begin to bleed again, but you barely notice. There's only the work. The next log, the next notch, the next wall section. Cooper pauses to chew another plug of tobacco, studying the walls critically. Going to need a ridge beam, something solid, and rafters coming down from it. Fitzgerald points to a tall, straight pine at the edge of the clearing. That one there would make a good ridge. Needs to be longer than the cabin. The three of you tackle the designated tree, a massive pine nearly 2 feet thick at the base, with Cooper and Fitzgerald working in tandem on opposite sides. The tree falls in minutes rather than the hour it would have taken you alone. Now for the tricky part, Fitzgerald says, wiping sweat from his brow despite the cold. We need to get this big bastard up on top of them walls. I spent a week with the historical reconstruction team in Montana, and they showed me how mountain men solved this problem. The expert told me without cranes or pulleys, they used pure physics and muscle. They'd create what we call a dead man. Basically a log buried perpendicular to the cabin that they could use as an anchor point for ropes and levers. It was incredibly dangerous work. Cooper surveys the site, then points to a spot about 20 feet from the cabin. We dig a hole there, bury a log halfway as an anchor, use ropes to guide the ridge beam up while we push from below. It's an ingenious solution, though labour-intensive. The three of you spend the next hour digging through the frozen ground to create the anchor point, then setting up the lifting system. Ground's harder than a heart. Cooper grunts as his axe bounces off the frozen earth. Your experience with hearts is extensive, I take it, Fitzgerald replies dryly. Cooper shoots him a glare, then laughs. A rough, rusty sound, like he doesn't use it often. More on yours, you skinny bastard. This banter, rough as it is, reminds you of something you've been missing out here alone. Human connection. Even this crude joking feels like a balm for the soul after weeks of silence. With the anchor set, you begin the dangerous process of raising the ridge beam. Cooper and Fitzgerald have fashioned a crude rope from rawhide strips, looping it around the heavy log. You position yourself at the bottom end, ready to push upward while they control the descent from the anchor point. On 3, Fitzgerald calls. 1, 2, 3. You heave with all your might, muscles screaming as the massive log begins to move. Inch by excruciating inch the ridge beam rises. Your vision narrows to just this task, this moment. Nothing exists but the burn in your shoulders and back, the rough bark under your palms, the desperate need to keep the log moving upward. Steady, Cooper shouts as the beam wavers slightly. Don't let it roll. A log this size, if it rolled now, would crush anyone in its path. The thought sends a fresh surge of strength through your tired body. Finally, after what seems like hours, the ridge beam reaches the top of the walls. With careful coordination, the three of you maneuver it into position along the central axis of the cabin. "Hold it there," Fitzgerald calls, scrambling up the walls with surprising agility for a man his age. He quickly lashes the beam into place with more rawhide strips, securing it temporarily until it can be properly notched and set. The sky is growing darker, both from the approaching evening and the intensifying storm. The snow is falling steadily now, accumulating on your shoulders and head as you work. Need to get them rafters up before full dark. Cooper says already moving to cut the smaller logs that will form the roof's framework. You've never worked so hard or so fast in your life. With Fitzgerald directing, you and Cooper cut and position rafters, logs about 6 inches in diameter that extend from the ridge beam down to the top of the walls at an angle, forming the pitched roof structure. Each rafter must be notched at both ends at the ridge beam, and at the wall top to keep it from sliding. It's precise work made more difficult by the fading light and worsening weather. I asked a historian once about how these men worked in such conditions. He told me they didn't have the luxury of waiting for good weather. If a storm was coming and you didn't have shelter, you worked through snow, sleet, whatever came. Men who couldn't or wouldn't do that simply didn't survive to tell their tales. As darkness begins to fall in earnest, you have the basic roof structure in place, the ridge beam and rafters forming a sturdy A-frame. It's not complete. You still need cross pieces and some kind of covering, but it's enough that you can finish it tomorrow, even in heavy snow. That'll hold for tonight, Fitzgerald says, surveying your work with obvious satisfaction. Still needs a proper covering, but it'll keep the worst of the snow off.